It began on an unassuming Tuesday night at the SETI Institute, where Dr. Eleanor Graves was meticulously analyzing data from the Deep Space Radio Telescope Array stationed in Chile. A brilliant astrophysicist with a penchant for detail, Eleanor had dedicated her life to deciphering the faint whispers of the universe. As she scanned through the static-filled waves of a distant galaxy catalogued as NGC 7320, a peculiar anomaly caught her attention. At first, it appeared to be nothing more than a brief spike in amplitude, something easily attributed to cosmic interference or the random emissions of pulsars. But as Eleanor zoomed in on the data, her brow furrowed. This was no natural phenomenon. The signal repeated itself at intervals too precise to be random, and it carried an encoded complexity that was unmistakably artificial. Could this really be it? Eleanor muttered, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the lab. She called over her colleague, Dr. Marcus O'Reilly, a data analyst whose expertise lay in cryptographic patterns. Together, they isolated the signal and began to decode its structure. Hours turned into days as they pored over the sequence, running it through every algorithm they could muster. Slowly but surely, a pattern emerged, a series of mathematical primes interwoven with harmonic waveforms. It was a calling card, a hallmark of intelligence. News of the discovery spread quickly within the scientific community, though Eleanor insisted on maintaining secrecy until the data could be verified. A task force was assembled, bringing in experts from physics, linguistics, and even cryptography departments from the military. The consensus was clear: the signal was a deliberate transmission. But from whom and for what purpose remained a mystery. As the team worked tirelessly, Eleanor's mind kept returning to the origin point, an unremarkable region of space roughly 40 million light-years away. What civilization could possibly have sent this signal across such an unimaginable distance? The energy required alone suggested a level of technological sophistication far beyond humanity's grasp. Meanwhile, debates raged within the task force. Some argued the signal was a warning, while others believed it was an invitation. The signal's repeating structure seemed to suggest urgency, though its exact message remained elusive. Eventually, Eleanor made the controversial decision to reply. She reasoned that remaining silent could be interpreted as ignorance or worse, defiance. "Are we sure about this?" Marcus asked as Eleanor prepared the transmission. His voice carried an edge of unease. "We have no idea who or what we're talking to. We've spent centuries asking if we're alone," Eleanor replied. "Now we might finally have an answer. We can't let fear hold us back." The response was simple, a series of prime numbers followed by a representation of Earth's solar system and humanity's biochemical structure. Eleanor ensured the message was neutral, even friendly, hoping to convey curiosity without aggression. The reply was sent using Earth's most powerful radio telescope, a focused beam aimed directly at the source of the original signal. Weeks passed without a response. As the initial excitement waned, skepticism grew. Perhaps the signal was ancient, a relic from a long-dead civilization. Or maybe its creators had no means of receiving humanity's reply. Some even suggested the signal was a cosmic prank, an elaborate hoax perpetuated by unknown forces. But Eleanor refused to give up hope. She spent sleepless nights poring over every piece of data, searching for any clue that might explain the silence. Her obsession began to take its toll. Friends and colleagues noticed her growing withdrawal, her once meticulous appearance now disheveled. Still, she persisted, driven by a nagging feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen. Then, on a cold, rainy evening, the reply arrived. Eleanor was alone in the lab when the monitors came alive with activity. The signal was unlike anything she had seen before, a complex symphony of frequencies that danced and intertwined in ways that defied conventional understanding. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, and terrifying all at once. Her heart raced as she scrambled to decode the transmission. The message unfolded in layers, each revealing a fragment of information. First came the coordinates and exact location in Earth's orbit. Then, a visual representation of a massive object, its dimensions dwarfing anything humanity had ever encountered. Finally, a single phrase translated from the alien language into a crude approximation of English: "Prepare yourselves." Eleanor's hands trembled as she stared at the screen. The message was clear, yet its meaning was shrouded in ambiguity. Prepare for what? A visit? An invasion? Or something far worse? Within hours, the world knew. News outlets broadcast the discovery, and panic began to spread. Conspiracy theories flourished, ranging from benevolent extraterrestrial ambassadors to apocalyptic scenarios of annihilation. Governments convened emergency meetings, their leaders grappling with the implications of first contact. For the first time in history, humanity was united by a shared uncertainty. As Eleanor stood on the observatory's rooftop that night, gazing up at the star-filled sky, she couldn't shake the feeling that the signal had been a mistake, a message never meant for Earth. Yet the wheels had been set in motion, and there was no turning back. Whatever awaited humanity among the stars, it was now too late to hide. The air in the control room was electric. Scientists, engineers, and military advisors were glued to their monitors, awaiting the next development. It had been precisely 72 hours since the enigmatic reply to humanity's message was received, and now every global telescope and satellite was trained on the designated coordinates in Earth's orbit. Eleanor Graves sat at the center of the commotion, her sharp mind working to suppress the creeping anxiety gnawing at her resolve. The world outside was in chaos. News anchors spoke in frenzied tones about the possible meanings of the alien message, while conspiracy theorists on every corner of the internet proclaimed impending doom. Governments worldwide had mobilized their militaries, although no one knew what, exactly, they were preparing to fight. The skies above major cities buzzed with the hum of fighter jets and reconnaissance drones. Amidst all this, Eleanor could only wait, her fingers tightly gripping the edge of her workstation. Then, it happened. The alert came first as a faint ping, a deviation in the electromagnetic field around Earth. The signal was picked up by the deep space observatories, then confirmed by every major detection array. A massive object was approaching the planet, its speed slow but deliberate. Unlike the tumbling movements of natural asteroids or the erratic trajectories of rogue satellites, this object moved with precision. It was as though it wanted to be noticed. "Object entering geosynchronous orbit," a technician called out, his voice trembling. Data streams flooded the monitors, detailing the size, mass, and trajectory of the incoming vessel. It was enormous, nearly the size of Manhattan. Its outer surface was composed of an unfamiliar alloy, absorbing and refracting light in a way that gave it an eerie, liquid-like appearance. Despite its size, the ship emitted no heat or radiation detectable by Earth's instruments, an engineering feat that left even the most seasoned scientists baffled. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as the alien vessel came into view on the high-resolution displays. It wasn't shaped like the sleek spacecraft of science fiction. Instead, it resembled a jagged obelisk, asymmetrical yet oddly elegant, with spires jutting out at impossible angles. The ship was a work of art, albeit one that exuded an air of menace. The room erupted in activity as leaders from around the globe connected via secure channels. Questions flew faster than answers. Should the object be regarded as a threat? Should humanity attempt to communicate? And, most importantly, what did the aliens want? Before anyone could act, the ship did. Without warning, a beam of light shot out from its lower structure, illuminating a desolate patch of the Pacific Ocean. The beam wasn't destructive. Instead, it seemed to scan the area, sending ripples of energy across the water's surface. Moments later, a deep hum resonated through the atmosphere, so powerful that it was felt as much as it was heard. The light faded, and in its place, a massive, crystalline object materialized on the ocean's surface. "Is that some kind of beacon?" Marcus O'Reilly muttered, standing beside Eleanor. The crystalline structure glowed faintly, emitting pulses of energy that matched the alien vessel's electromagnetic signature. It was clear that the two were connected, but the purpose of the object remained a mystery. Eleanor didn't reply. Her eyes were fixed on the ship, her mind racing to piece together the implications of what she was witnessing. The vessel hadn't fired any weapons or made any overtly hostile moves. Yet its actions were deliberate, calculated. It was clear that this wasn't a random encounter. The aliens had come with an agenda, one that humanity was only beginning to glimpse. Then, the message came. A deep, resonant voice filled the airwaves, transmitted across every frequency known to man. It spoke in an alien tongue, but within moments the words began to morph, aligning themselves with Earth's most widely spoken languages. The translation was crude, But the meaning was unmistakable. You were not the intended recipients of the signal. This is your only warning. Prepare yourselves. The room fell silent. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine as the weight of the message sank in. The aliens knew humanity had intercepted their signal, and they were not pleased. Worse, the phrase "prepare yourselves" hung ominously in the air, a foreboding hint at what might come next. What does it mean, prepare ourselves? One of the military advisors demanded, his voice breaking the stunned silence. Is this a threat? A warning? Or something else entirely? Eleanor didn't answer. Her thoughts were already racing toward the crystalline object floating in the Pacific. Could it be some kind of tool? A test? Or perhaps a message in its own right? Whatever its purpose, it was the only clue humanity had to understanding the alien visitors. As the world's leaders debated their next move, Eleanor made a decision. She needed to see the object for herself. She argued her case to the task force, emphasizing the need for a scientific perspective in interpreting the artifact. Reluctantly, the military agreed to include her in the expedition to the site. The journey to the Pacific was uneventful, but Eleanor's mind was anything but calm. She stared out the window of the aircraft, watching as the endless expanse of ocean stretched out beneath her. When the crystalline structure finally came into view, her breath caught in her throat. It was even more stunning up close, a monolithic shard of transparent material, its surface shimmering with faint, rainbow-like patterns. As the team approached in their research vessel, the artifact began to react. Pulses of light rippled across its surface, synchronized with the rhythm of the alien ship still hovering in orbit. It was as though the artifact was alive, responding to their presence. Eleanor felt a mix of awe and unease as the team prepared to analyze the structure. In those moments, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had crossed a line it wasn't meant to approach. The signal hadn't been for Earth, but they had answered anyway. And now, whatever consequences awaited them were set in motion. The crystalline object, the alien ship, and the cryptic warning all pointed to a single truth: humanity was no longer alone in the universe. But whether that truth would bring salvation or destruction remained unknown. The crystalline artifact floated silently on the surface of the Pacific Ocean, its alien design starkly contrasting the natural surroundings. From a distance it appeared serene, almost peaceful, but up close its presence felt anything but. Eleanor Graves stood on the deck of the research vessel, her gaze fixed on the massive structure. The sunlight refracted through the artifact's semi-transparent surface, casting intricate, shifting patterns of light on the ocean waves. It was mesmerizing and unsettling all at once. As the research team prepared their equipment, the military contingent stationed on the vessel remained on high alert. Soldiers in full tactical gear patrolled the perimeter, their weapons aimed nervously at the enigmatic object. No one knew what the artifact was capable of, and the uncertainty weighed heavily on everyone present. Eleanor adjusted her headset and activated her tablet, syncing it with the sensors mounted on the ship. She could see streams of data being generated in real-time: electromagnetic readings, spectral analyses, and temperature fluctuations. The artifact pulsed with a faint but distinct energy signature, one that seemed to resonate in patterns too complex for any immediate interpretation. "Anything unusual yet?" Marcus O'Reilly's voice crackled through the headset. He was monitoring the mission remotely from the control center back at the SETI Institute. "Unusual doesn't even begin to describe it," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. "This thing is emitting energy at wavelengths we've never seen before. It's not just light, it's affecting the entire electromagnetic spectrum." The artifact emitted another pulse, stronger this time. The energy rippled across the ocean, sending vibrations through the ship's hull. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, and one of the soldiers muttered, "What the hell was that?" Eleanor ignored the murmurs and focused on the data. The artifact's pulses weren't random, they were rhythmic, almost musical. She wondered if it was trying to communicate, though its message remained indecipherable. Her fingers danced across the tablet screen as she adjusted the equipment settings, hoping to capture more detailed readings. Then, the artifact changed. A low, resonant hum began emanating from its core, growing louder and deeper with each passing second. The crystalline structure, once a static monolith, started to shift. Its surface shimmered as sections of it began to move, rearranging themselves with a fluidity that defied logic. It was as though the artifact was alive, reconfiguring itself in response to some unseen command. Eleanor's heart raced as she watched the transformation. "It's activating," she whispered more to herself than anyone else. "What do you mean, activating?" Marcus's voice was sharp with concern. "It's changing. The structure is adapting, almost like it's preparing for something." The hum reached a crescendo, and suddenly a beam of light shot out from the artifact, piercing the sky. It was impossibly bright, a column of pure energy that extended far beyond Earth's atmosphere. The ship's sensors went haywire, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the output. Alarms blared as the crew scrambled to stabilize their equipment. "Report," barked the lead officer of the military contingent, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We're detecting a massive surge in energy," one of the technicians replied. "It's unlike anything we've ever encountered. The artifact is emitting signals across multiple dimensions of space-time." Eleanor barely registered the words as she stared at the beam of light. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could this be a message? A signal to the alien ship still in orbit? Or was it something more sinister, an activation of a weapon, perhaps, or a summons for reinforcements? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden jolt. The ship rocked violently as a wave of energy radiated outward from the artifact. The soldiers braced themselves, and several crew members were knocked off their feet. Eleanor grabbed the nearest railing, her tablet slipping from her hands and clattering onto the deck. "Graves, are you okay?" Marcus's voice crackled urgently. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice betrayed her unease. "But this thing is far from done. It's building up to something." The artifact pulsed again, and this time, the beam of light fractured into dozens of smaller beams, each shooting off in a different direction. The beams spread across the globe, their destinations unknown. Satellites picked up the phenomenon, and within minutes, every major news outlet was broadcasting live footage of the event. The world watched in stunned silence as the beams painted the sky with a web of glowing lines. Eleanor's earpiece buzzed with frantic voices as scientists and officials from around the globe tried to make sense of what was happening. Some speculated that the beams were mapping the planet, while others feared they were targeting specific locations for an impending attack. The truth remained elusive, hidden behind the artifact's alien design and purpose. As the beams continued their celestial dance, Eleanor noticed a change in the artifact's energy signature. It was stabilizing, its previous chaotic fluctuations giving way to a steady, deliberate rhythm. She frowned, her mind working to interpret the data. The artifact wasn't just emitting energy, it was drawing something in. "What is it doing?" she muttered, her voice barely audible. "Graves, you need to get out of there," Marcus said urgently. "Whatever this thing is, it's escalating. It's not safe." Eleanor hesitated. Every instinct told her to stay, to gather as much information as possible. But the fear in Marcus's voice was hard to ignore. Before she could respond, the artifact released another pulse, this one so powerful that it knocked out the ship's power. The lights flickered and died, leaving the vessel in darkness save for the eerie glow of the artifact. Panic erupted among the crew as they scrambled to restore power. Eleanor clung to the railing, her eyes fixed on the crystalline structure. It loomed over the ship like a silent sentinel, its glowing surface pulsating with a strange, almost hypnotic rhythm. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the activity ceased. The beams of light disappeared, and the artifact fell silent. The hum faded into the background, replaced by the gentle lapping of waves against the ship's hull. For a moment, it seemed as though the artifact had returned to its dormant state. But Eleanor knew better. The artifact wasn't dormant, it was waiting. She turned to the lead officer, her voice firm despite the turmoil in her chest. "We need to analyze everything we've collected. Whatever just happened, it's far from over." The officer nodded, his expression grim. "Agreed. But next time, we'll be ready." Eleanor wasn't so sure. Whatever the artifact had done, it had sent ripples across the fabric of Earth's existence. And as she stared at the silent monolith, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was on the brink of something far larger and far more dangerous than anyone could comprehend. The crystalline artifact sat silently on the ocean's surface, its once pulsing energy seemingly dormant. But for Eleanor Graves, there was no comfort in its stillness. She sat in the ship's command center, reviewing the staggering amount of data collected during the artifact's activation. Her screen was awash with complex energy readings, spectral analyses, and electromagnetic fluctuations that defied known physics. Yet none of it offered answers, only more questions. What was the artifact's purpose? What was it summoning or warning against? The uneasy calm didn't last. Early the next morning, a wave of static disrupted global communications. Satellites failed to transmit signals, aircraft lost contact with control towers, and even Earth's magnetic field experienced minor disruptions. Military installations worldwide scrambled to identify the cause, while citizens in major cities reported strange auroras streaking the sky, visible even in daylight. Panic began to spread. Eleanor was on the deck when she saw it. At first it looked like a faint shimmer in the sky, a distortion that seemed to ripple across the atmosphere. Then, as the distortion grew more defined, the truth became apparent. A fleet of alien vessels was emerging, their forms materializing like ghosts out of thin air. The sight sent a wave of hushed awe through the crew as everyone stopped what they were doing to stare. The ships were unlike anything humanity had imagined. Their designs were angular and sharp, as though carved from solid obsidian. Some glowed faintly with a greenish hue, while others seemed to absorb all light, appearing as voids against the blue sky. There were dozens of them, varying in size from small, dart-like craft to massive leviathans that dwarfed the artifact below. Multiple contacts entering Earth's atmosphere, the ship's radar operator announced, his voice tight with fear. Their trajectory is converging on our position. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. It was no coincidence. The artifact had been a beacon, and these ships were its answer. She quickly descended back into the command center, where the military officers were already in a frenzy. Orders were being barked into radios, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. "Get me a secure line to HQ," barked Colonel Hendricks, the commanding officer overseeing the mission. He was a no-nonsense man with a grizzled demeanor, but even he seemed shaken by the sight of the alien fleet. Eleanor approached him, her mind racing. "We need to establish contact," she said, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "If these ships are here in response to the artifact, they might be willing to communicate. And if they're not," Hendricks shot back, "I'm not putting this team in the crosshairs of an unknown threat. Then we'll never know why they're here," Eleanor argued. "And ignorance might be the greater danger." Before Hendricks could respond, a sharp alarm filled the room. The radar operator looked up, pale-faced. "One of the ships is breaking formation. It's heading directly for the artifact." Everyone's attention shifted to the main monitor, where the alien vessel in question was displayed. It was smaller than the others, sleek and dagger-like, but its movements were precise and deliberate. As it approached the artifact, a series of lights began to flicker along its hull, pulsing in patterns eerily similar to those emitted by the artifact earlier. "What's it doing?" Hendricks demanded. "It looks like it's interfacing," Eleanor said, her eyes narrowing as she studied the screen. "The artifact's energy signature is changing. It's responding to the ship." The artifact began to glow once more, its crystalline surface shimmering with an intensity that rivaled the sun. The pulses of light became rapid and erratic, and a low, resonant hum filled the air, audible even aboard the research vessel. The crew braced themselves as the ship rocked slightly, the artifact's energy creating ripples across the ocean's surface. Then, without warning, the artifact released a massive energy burst, a shockwave that expanded outward at incredible speed. The alien ship closest to it absorbed the brunt of the blast, its shields flaring brightly before collapsing. The ship was thrown backward, crashing into the ocean with a deafening roar. For a moment there was silence, but the silence didn't last. The remaining alien vessels reacted immediately. They repositioned themselves into a defensive formation, their movements swift and coordinated. Beams of energy shot out from their hulls, striking the artifact with pinpoint accuracy. The artifact absorbed the hits without visible damage, its glowing surface pulsating more violently with each impact. Eleanor watched in stunned disbelief. The artifact was under attack, and it was holding its own. But why? What had prompted the aliens to respond with force? She couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was caught in the middle of something far larger than it understood. The command center was in chaos as officers relayed updates and scrambled to assess the situation. Eleanor barely registered the noise as she focused on the data streaming in from the sensors. The artifact's energy levels were spiking, and its emissions were beginning to overlap with the frequencies recorded during its initial activation. "It's building up to something," she muttered, her voice barely audible over the commotion. Hendricks heard her and turned sharply. "What do you mean?" "Look at the readings," Eleanor said, pointing to her tablet. "The artifact isn't just defending itself, it's retaliating. It's gathering energy for a counterstrike." As if on cue, the artifact unleashed another shockwave, this one more focused and directed. The energy beam shot upward, striking one of the larger alien vessels. The ship's shields flickered and failed, and moments later it exploded in a brilliant burst of light. The remaining ships responded with renewed aggression, their attacks intensifying. Eleanor's heart sank. The situation was spiraling out of control, and humanity was powerless to stop it. The artifact and the alien fleet were locked in a battle that seemed to transcend anything Earth had ever encountered. And yet, she couldn't help but wonder what had they truly unleashed. The comms crackled to life, interrupting her thoughts. It was Marcus, his voice urgent. "Eleanor, you need to get out of there. The artifact's energy output is destabilizing. If it overloads, it could take the entire region with it." Eleanor hesitated. Her instincts told her to stay, to gather as much data as possible. But the fear in Marcus's voice was hard to ignore. She turned to Hendricks, who was already issuing evacuation orders. The crew began to move quickly, securing equipment and preparing to abandon the vessel. As they prepared to leave, the artifact emitted one final pulse, its light dimming slightly before stabilizing. The alien fleet paused, their movements suddenly cautious. It was as though both sides were waiting, each assessing the other. For now, the battle had reached a tense stalemate. But Eleanor knew it was only a matter of time before the conflict reignited. And when it did, the consequences would be felt far beyond Earth. As the research vessel pulled away from the site, Eleanor couldn't help but look back at the artifact. It loomed on the horizon, a silent reminder of the forces humanity had unwittingly set in motion. The hostile visitors had arrived, and they weren't leaving anytime soon. The evacuation order had been given, and the research vessel was retreating toward the safety of international waters. Eleanor Graves stood on the bridge, her mind racing with unanswered questions. The artifact's sudden stabilization, the alien fleet's cautious retreat, and the violent exchange that had preceded it, none of it made sense. She knew one thing for certain: humanity was teetering on the edge of a precipice, and the next steps would determine its survival. As the vessel sped away, Eleanor remained glued to her data tablet, poring over the latest readings. The artifact's energy levels had dropped, but it wasn't dormant. Its emissions were steady and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a living organism. The alien ships, still hovering in Earth's atmosphere, seemed to be monitoring the artifact as well. Their formation remained tight and defensive, suggesting they weren't leaving anytime soon. Colonel Hendricks approached her, his expression grim. "We've received word from HQ. They want a full report on what's happening out here. Any insight you can give them?" Eleanor didn't look up. "The artifact is stabilizing, but it's still active. I think it's waiting." "Waiting for what?" Hendricks asked, his tone sharp. "That's the question, isn't it?" she replied, finally meeting his gaze. "The artifact wasn't meant for us, but we triggered it. Now, these aliens are here, and they're treating it like an enemy. Whatever its purpose, it's part of a conflict far bigger than Earth." Hendricks frowned. "And where does that leave us?" "At a crossroads," Eleanor said. "We can't fight these aliens, not with the technology we have. But if we don't figure out how to communicate with them, we're going to be collateral damage in a war we don't understand." The colonel didn't respond immediately. He stared out the window, his jaw tight. After a moment, he nodded. "Then let's find a way to talk." The following hours were a whirlwind of activity. The United Nations convened an emergency summit, connecting world leaders, scientists, and military officials via secure video links. Eleanor was summoned to present her findings, and despite her exhaustion, she laid out the situation as clearly as she could. "The artifact appears to be a beacon or a communication device," she explained. "Its activation seems to have drawn the attention of this alien fleet. We don't know their intentions, but their actions suggest hostility toward the artifact, not necessarily toward us. One of the diplomats leaned forward, his voice skeptical. If they're not hostile to us, why destroy our satellites and disrupt global systems? Eleanor hesitated. It's possible we were caught in the crossfire. The artifact emits energy across a wide spectrum, which could have interfered with their technology. Or they might see us as unintentional participants in this conflict. The room fell silent. Then another voice, this one from a high-ranking general, broke through the tension. What are our options? Can we disable the artifact? Eleanor shook her head. The artifact's material composition is unlike anything we've encountered. Our weapons would be useless against it, and even if we could destroy it, we'd risk provoking the alien fleet further. The discussion dragged on with no clear resolution. Meanwhile, the alien ships remained in orbit, their presence a constant reminder of the stakes. As the world debated its next move, Eleanor worked tirelessly with her team, searching for a way to communicate with the aliens. They focused on the artifact's energy patterns, hoping to uncover a code or signal that might bridge the gap. It was a painstaking process, but Eleanor refused to give up. 3 days later, they had a breakthrough. Marcus O'Reilly, who had been analyzing the artifact's harmonic emissions, discovered a sequence embedded within the energy pulses. It was a repeating pattern that mirrored the original signal intercepted by Earth, proof that the artifact was still transmitting, even in its stabilized state. It's like an echo, Marcus explained during a late-night conference call. The artifact is broadcasting the same signal that brought the aliens here, but it's modified. I think it's trying to communicate with them. Eleanor's mind raced. If the artifact was sending a message, then humanity might be able to intercept and decode it. Can we isolate the sequence? She asked. We're working on it, Marcus replied. But this isn't just language, it's something more complex. It's like the artifact is speaking in equations, using concepts we don't fully understand. Then we'll learn, Eleanor said firmly. If this is our chance to communicate, we can't waste it. The following hours were a blur of calculations, simulations, and frantic collaboration. Finally, the team succeeded in extracting a fragment of the artifact's transmission. It was a series of geometric shapes and mathematical formulas, overlaid with bursts of harmonic frequencies. Eleanor and Marcus worked together to interpret the sequence, using every tool at their disposal. What they uncovered was staggering. The artifact's message wasn't a call for help or an act of defiance. It was a warning. The signal described an approaching force, an ancient enemy of the artifact's creators. The alien fleet wasn't here to destroy the artifact, they were here to stop it from falling into the wrong hands. Eleanor felt a chill as she realized the implications. Humanity had unwittingly activated a weapon or perhaps a shield designed to repel this enemy. The alien fleet was trying to contain the situation, but their distrust of Earth was complicating matters. We need to show them we understand, Eleanor said. If we can prove we're not a threat, maybe they'll work with us. Using the decoded message as a foundation, the team crafted a response. It was a blend of mathematical concepts and visual representations designed to convey humanity's understanding of the artifact's purpose. Eleanor herself oversaw the transmission, sending it directly to the alien fleet. For hours, there was no response. Tensions ran high as the world waited, unsure whether the aliens would accept the message or retaliate. Then, just as hope began to wane, the fleet moved. The alien ships broke formation, descending toward Earth's surface. One of the larger vessels landed near the artifact, its sleek hull gleaming in the sunlight. A single, humanoid figure emerged, clad in a suit that shimmered like liquid metal. The figure raised its hand, and a holographic projection appeared in the air, a direct response to humanity's message. The projection was a map of the galaxy, overlaid with a series of coordinates and warnings. Eleanor stepped forward, her heart pounding as she studied the display. The map showed a region of space marked with ominous red symbols, the territory of the approaching enemy. The warnings were clear: if the artifact remained active, it would draw the enemy to Earth. Eleanor turned to Hendricks, her voice urgent. We have to shut it down. That's the only way to stop this. The colonel hesitated, then gave the order. Working alongside the alien figure, Eleanor's team developed a method to deactivate the artifact. It was a delicate process, requiring precise synchronization between human and alien technology. But in the end, they succeeded. As the artifact powered down, the alien fleet began to withdraw. The humanoid figure turned to Eleanor and raised its hand in a gesture that seemed almost like gratitude. Then, without a word, it returned to its ship. The fleet disappeared as quickly as it had arrived, leaving Earth in stunned silence. The artifact remained, now dormant and harmless, a reminder of the events that had unfolded. Eleanor stood on the deck of the research vessel, gazing out at the horizon. Humanity had survived its first encounter with an alien race, but the experience had left her changed. She knew the universe was far larger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. But for the first time, she also felt hope that humanity could rise to meet whatever challenges lay ahead.